Same thing with registration. Registration can be extremely cumbersome and can be very, very expensive. So make sure you understand what equipment you're bringing across the border, and because there's a lot of cost to be incurred depending on which state, county you're registering that unit in, and then also if you're going to go between different states. The last thing, and I didn't actually have this on the slide, was business practices. I put it down under equipment because it's got some implications. If you are importing equipment from Canada into the U.S., make sure you understand what the different business practices are. Good example is wireline business. The wireline business in Canada, there's significant operating differences between how they operate here versus how we operate south of the border. And again, when you're paying excise tax and you're paying different taxes on registration and on sales and use tax and everything else and excise taxes, make sure that you know what equipment you need down there before you go to work. Which brings me to taxes. Jim's going to follow me up on this, but this is the most complex area of doing business in the U.S. because it really is, that's where you really realize that it is a whole different world. Again, and I'm going on the assumption of going down the way we did, where we took a bunch of our excess equipment and people and made a market in the U.S. But when you're taking equipment down, excise tax is a huge issue. Make sure you understand it and what it applies to and how you want to deal with that. There are also county and state tax issues. Again, they can be very cumbersome and difficult, particularly if you're taking equipment from state to state or county, even county to county can almost seem like a whole new, like you're crossing an actual border. So, and then the last one is the sales use tax. It's also very costly. So again, really the whole thing is when it comes to equipment, make sure you understand exactly what you're facing with from a taxing side. Banking and insurance. Got a few points here. The financing structure is really quite key. You're going to want to have good advice as far as how you want to set up your company in the U.S. Whether you want, again, under the premise that you're going to be importing equipment from Canada, you want to make sure that you know whether you're going to sell that equipment down south or whether you're going to lease it. And there's pros and cons to doing both. It's also important to have the local banking for AR, AP, payroll, those kinds of things. It's good to have a local bank and establish those relationships. On the financing side, the actual lending side, it's important to find out from your local bank whether they will support equipment that goes across the border. Some banks will, some banks won't. HSBC obviously will. They've got a lot of international experience and they've been very helpful for us. We've basically been able to, have all our banking facilities up here and just be able to lend down to the U.S. as required. And then the last thing is insurance. Again, these are different policies. Make sure, as much fun as it is reading an insurance policy, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into because the riders are different. A quick example that I threw up was for vehicles is liability insurance. Here you have a pollution coverage that's built into your vehicle insurance. There you need a separate rider for pollution insurance, for example. So just really take the time to understand, again, what you're signing up for and understand where your risks are and where your liabilities might be. On to the fun stuff. This is more, that's more on the regulatory type things. From a customer perspective, I find the contracts that we enter into in the U.S., Canada being, in our businesses at least, is more or less a call-out type basis. We may have some contractual arrangements in place up here, but the bulk of the work we do up here is on a call-out basis, and it's the exact opposite in the U.S. Most of our work down there is on a first call or a contracted basis. So. That kind of leads into the RFP process, which is generally a lot more formalized than it is up here. And so I guess when you're doing an RFP, make sure you understand what you're bidding on and make sure you're comfortable with what margin you're going to drive with that. Try and think about what could happen during the year. If you get the 12-month or a 36-month contract, try and have escalation clauses in there. Just make sure you cover yourself off so that when you're committed, you're committed. So. The other thing I find is because of the first call, the contracted nature of the business down there, you really do need to prove yourself a lot more. I find here a lot of times we'll get work because a buddy of a buddy, those kinds of things, and sure, you know what, go ahead and perforate a well or go ahead and flow this one back. Again, with a more formalized RFP process and with a more streamlined purchasing departments in most of our customers' offices, you really need to prove yourself. So trial runs, trial wells, service quality meetings are a big part of our day-to-day deal there. You really have to prove your quality. IS Net World, I'm sure you're familiar with that. You have to make sure you're up to speed on IS Net World. You know, the safety, the orientation side, there's safe land training versus, you know, the various IRP 16s here. There's a few differences there, but you really do need to come well prepared to do business in the U.S. Again, with the more formalized RFP process and with more of a contractual nature, there's a lot less field discretion in calling work. So again, that is as it is. And the last thing, I hesitated whether to put this on here, but the way we're trying to run our U.S. business as much as possible, and here I am a speaking exception to that rule, is that we're trying to have our U.S. people running our U.S. businesses. I'm currently on my way down to Denver myself, but there is a bit of a stigma. It's no different than when we have international companies come to work in Canada. There's a bit of a stigma attached to that. So just, it's more of an awareness thing than anything else, but it is there. And finally, I just, in general, just have patience. It truly is a different world down there, and so have the patience and understand it. And you know, when you're budgeting your U.S. entry, make sure you probably add 6 months to whatever time frame you're trying to put on it. And I won't say double your cost, but make sure you budget a lot more expense than you might have thought, because there are a lot of little pitfalls along the way that even with good, solid advice, you're just going to learn through the school of hard knocks. So have patience. It is a good market. It's been very good for our company, and we see it continuing to grow. You know, as Canada becomes more and more of a swing producer to the U.S., having that U.S. base is becoming more and more important to us. So that was kind of all I had. So I think what we were going to do is have Jim and Andrew and Kevin go through their bits, and then, am I taking your bit, Lois? Oh.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.